Hey there everyone, my name is Travis Bowman. Let's talk about the Hori Split Pad Pro, compare those to Nintendo's Joy-Cons, and figure out just how much use you can get out of these Hori pads on your Nintendo Switch. Now if you're like me, I'm sure you're considering spending the cash on this controller because the original Switch Joy-Cons just aren't doing it for you. I'm sure they're fine for kids with smaller hands, but for us big kids who aren't playing games in the 90s anymore, they can be a bit uncomfortable after an hour or so of intense gameplay. And let's not forget about that pathetic excuse for a directional pad that won't allow you to accurately do quarter circles for fighting games, or even jump to that next surface in platforming games. The Hori Split Pad Pro could be the answer to all of these inconveniences when you're just wanting to sit down and chill with a good game for a while. Please do take note that this version of the Hori Split Pad Pro cannot be used as a standalone controller and can only be used when connected to the Switch in handheld mode. Now when you first pop these controllers in, the first thing that you're going to notice is that your hands are going to be quite a bit farther away from each other than you're used to. It feels like you're holding a steering wheel as far as the distance is concerned, but after a half hour or so of grinding for Souls and Dark Souls Remastered, you'll definitely get used to it. The controller is made of pretty hard plastic, and I imagine if you drop them a couple of times they'd still be fine. Speaking of Dark Souls, if you're used to playing third-person action games on a PlayStation or Xbox controller, the split pad will make you feel right at home on the Switch. I started my first playthrough of Dark Souls Remastered and Pokemon Legends Arceus with my Nintendo Joy-Cons, and this was the spark that pushed me to purchase the Split Pad Pro. The sticks on the Joy-Cons are almost like a slight upgrade to the sliders on Nintendo's other handhelds like the 3DS. For a guy with pretty big hands, these sticks just weren't making the experience very pleasant, or at least not as pleasant as it probably could have been. Sticks on the Split Pad Pro are quite comfortable with a slight concave indentation for your thumbs to rest in. The distance between the top of the stick and the controller itself is much wider than on the Joy-Cons, but it's not too wide. Something to note is that after about a month of use, the top of the left thumbstick seemed to be rubbing against the controller itself, and it started to get a little crunchy, much like the original Nintendo 64 controllers used to get. Thus far, it hasn't impacted any gameplay negatively, and I'm sure you could get rid of that excess plastic that rubbed off with isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip. Just a side note, as I'm sure you're noticing the acrylic thumbnail I've got there on my right thumb in this video. But before you ask, I'm a fingerstyle guitar player, and I use acrylic nails on my right hand to play guitar arrangements of video game music just like this. For more complex video game arrangements, be sure to check out my channel. Now back to the video. The action buttons have a click to them when they're fully pressed, and as much as I'm not a big fan of controllers that do this, it's not enough to get on your nerves in the long run. Legends Arceus is a really great experience with this controller. It really feels as though I'm playing this game with a proper Xbox controller, and both of these sets of shoulder buttons are super responsive. The R and L shoulder buttons are quite a bit smaller than the ZR and ZL triggers, and throwing Pokeballs with ZR is a seamless action that feels right at home. Doom 2016 on the go is really nice, and despite the fact that the graphics are extremely dumbed down from the PlayStation or PC release, the Switch port is pretty solid. I've had no issues using the Split Pad Pro with this game, and I'm looking to beat it on the go just like I did at home on the PS4. I always hated the idea of having buttons replacing a proper directional pad, and it just felt wrong getting into the menu on Legends Arceus by pressing the up button rather than up on an actual D-pad. In Legends Arceus, the start button is mapped to mounting and dismounting the Pokemon you choose to traverse the terrain, and the up button has taken the role of the menu function. You'd think having a button replacing a D-pad would feel okay for this specific game, but 30 years of muscle memory beg to differ. A D-pad should never ever be replaced by directional buttons. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that's my opinion. The D-pad is made with a sturdy plastic, and it's not too stiff, but definitely not squishy like most other third-party controllers can be. Demons of Asteborg feels right at home, and if I ever miss a platform, it's my fault. Each direction is nice and responsive, and there's no slippage off the D-pad when inputting tight directions. By the way, if you've never heard of Demons of Asteborg, it's a super cool platformer that was actually made for the Sega Genesis, and this is a port for the Switch. The over punch input for Axel's Grand Upper in Streets of Rage 4 feels nice and tight just like it should be, and rolls up and down on the screen while using a Streets of Rage 3 character are seamless. Try doing that with the directional buttons on the Joy-Con while in an intense fight during survival mode, or just use an actual D-pad instead. The days of trying to get through a 2D side-scrolling game with a thumbstick because you're so sick of the directional buttons on the Joy-Cons are over. As nice as it is to have available, I can't imagine a scenario where I'd actually be using the turbo buttons on the Switch, but to each their own. At least they're there, right? There are 2 extra sets of buttons on the back of the controller, but to be honest, I haven't had a need to map them as of yet. The secondary functional buttons, such as the plus and minus buttons, as well as the home button, are rubbery and they work just fine. They don't feel too squishy like some of the other third-party controllers might feel. Now, if you're planning on getting this controller to play on the go, of course you'll have to think about carrying cases, and eventually buying another damn accessory for your Switch. I have a generic carrying case for my Switch that fits some games and also has a mesh pocket on top for what I assume must be storage for extra Joy-Cons. The case fits the stock Switch with the Joy-Cons nice and snug, but unfortunately there's just no way that the Hori controller is going to fit in this case, unless you tuck them inside the mesh pocket at just the right angle, and I really don't recommend doing this. It's just going to cause unnecessary wear and tear on your controllers, and possibly even your Switch screen, and no one wants any of that. But for those curious, it actually does fit, although the stitching that is holding the case together looks like it could pop at literally any time. Overall, if you're longing for a controller that feels like you're actually playing a console instead of a handheld, then the Hori Split Pad Pro is definitely worth a purchase. I haven't used my Joy-Cons one single time after slapping these Hori pads on, and to be honest, I can't see a reason to even use the Joy-Cons while the Switch is docked, as long as I've got this 8BitDo wireless Bluetooth receiver to use with my PS5 controller. That is a topic for another video. Thank you very much for watching and subscribing. Be sure to check out more video game music on my channel, and I'll catch you guys next time.